After months of speculation, Red Bull have confirmed that they will replace Alex Albon with Sergio Perez for the 2021 season, with Albon becoming the team's test and reserve driver for the season. This is the first time that the team have taken a driver from outside of their driver programme since bringing in Mark Webber in 2007. So what's next for the young Thai driver as he continues his racing career? My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Albon's career so far. After finishing third in a competitive 2018 Formula 2 season behind George Russell and Lando Norris, Albon initially made the move to Formula E to race for the Dams team. But the knock-on effects of Daniel Ricciardo's shock move to Renault meant that a Red Bull-owned seat had become available at Toro Rosso, which Albon ended up taking for the 2019 season, replacing Pierre Gasly as he was promoted to the senior team. Alongside Albon was Daniel Kvyat, who was returning to the Red Bull family after being dropped from the Toro Rosso team at the end of 2017. The 2019 season started well for Albon as he achieved his first F1 points with a 9th position in Bahrain, following this up with an impressive drive at the next race in China to go from the pit lane to 10th position at the checkered flag. In the midfield car, Albon was finding his feet in Formula 1 with fairly good performances, but with some mistakes as you may expect from a rookie driver. Another performance to note came at the chaotic, rain-affected race in Germany, where he drove a fine race to finish 6th, and it could have been even better for the Thai driver if it wasn't for Gasly, who collided with Albon late on in the race on lap 62. Having said this, Albon's teammate, Kvyat, did manage to achieve a podium finish at the same race. So overall, it had been an impressive end to the first half of the season for Albon, and despite being behind his more experienced teammate, Kvyat, in the championship, the 23-year-old driver was promoted to the senior Red Bull team for the second half of the season to replace the struggling Pierre Gasly. A controversial switch considering Albon's limited F1 experience, but given the ruthless nature of the Red Bull driver setup, the switch was not really a surprise. Helmut Marko and Christian Horner stated that the opportunity for Albon would mean that the senior team would be familiar with all three of the driver options for the second Red Bull seat for 2020. Those being Gasly, Albon and Kvyat, who'd raced for the team back in 2015 and 2016. For me, this was the first real hurdle in Albon's short Formula 1 career so far. He competed in just 12 races before he was given the opportunity to drive for a front-running team, an offer that he could not refuse. So there was an awful lot of pressure on an unproven rookie. Thinking about other drivers that have emerged in the last few years, take Max Verstappen, who was given a year and a half at Toro Rosso before being promoted in 2016. Charles Leclerc had a full season at Alfa Romeo before being promoted at Ferrari, and currently it looks like George Russell will have 3 full seasons at Williams before he stands a chance of being promoted to the Mercedes team. And not to forget, even Pierre Gasly, the man who was being demoted from Red Bull, had been given a full year at Toro Rosso before being promoted. So to have just half a season under your belt before going into a front-running team was a big ask for Albon, and perhaps the decision that has ultimately led to his demotion at the end of this year. But his first experiences in the Red Bull car were good. In Belgium, he started 17th following power unit penalties, but he managed to race the car well with some impressive overtakes and to cross the line in 5th position, the best of the rest spot following the 2 Ferrari and Mercedes drivers. Albon then proceeded to post points finishes in all but one race in the second half of the season, with the exception coming in Brazil, where arguably he should have ended up on the podium, before Lewis Hamilton spun him out at a late safety car restart. Albon's Red Bull performances were exactly what the front-running team needed, as he not only finished inside of the points in most of the races, but he also didn't finish below 6th position in those races that he wasn't impeded. To add to this, Albon was consistently able to race and overtake whenever he found himself out of position in the Red Bull car, something that Pierre Gasly was criticised for during his time in the RB15. So it was no surprise when Red Bull announced that Alex Albon would continue alongside Max Verstappen for 2020. And the 2020 season presented a new opportunity for Red Bull, as Ferrari had fallen back relative to the other teams due to the power unit regulation clarification from the FIA during the off-season. It meant that the RB16 car was definitively the second fastest, and for Albon, this meant that where 6th place finishes were acceptable during 2019, he would now be expected to finish 4th as a minimum at each Grand Prix. At the same time, the teams in the midfield got closer to the front-running teams, so they were harder to overtake and more competitive during one-lap pace. And it was in qualifying where Albon struggled to keep up with the other front-runners. He qualified in that 4th position just 4 times over the 17-race season, with an average starting spot of 7.8. Not really acceptable in what was the 2nd fastest car on the grid. But not only did Albon struggle with his Saturday pace, he also struggled to improve from his starting position the majority of the time, as his average finishing position ended up being 8.3. Despite this, Albon did manage to achieve 2 podiums at the Tuscan and Bahrain Grand Prix, but his struggles were clear, and given Red Bull have their best shot at challenging Mercedes for the title in 2021, Red Bull were forced to make the switch to pick up the free agent Sergio Perez. What's next for Alex Albon? So, after a difficult season, Albon's been demoted to become the Red Bull reserve driver for 2021, with the experienced race winner Sergio Perez taking that 2nd seat at Red Bull. As reserve driver, Albon has been promised significant test miles and also been confirmed that he would be the one to take the seat if any of the 4 Red Bull drivers on the grid are unable to race for any reason. Helmut Marko has also mentioned that Albon would be available for other teams to loan if required. So Albon still has the backing of the Red Bull team, as they seem to want to find a path for Alex Albon to get a seat on the F1 grid again in the future. For me, I think this is acknowledgement from the team that the Thai driver was promoted too soon. I reckon Albon will end up in the AlphaTauri in 2022, as I expect Pierre Gasly will move on from the Red Bull programme, given his future is limited. And I think Sergio Perez will deliver for Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen and allow the team to compete with Mercedes at every race. It's also worth mentioning that drivers have come back from years out before. Esteban Ocon is the latest driver to have done so. Even Daniel Kvyat has taken a year away from the starting grid. So it isn't out of the question that Albon will return after some time away next year. And I think he does have the potential to stay in Formula 1 based on his performance so far. It'll be interesting to see whether Red Bull can see the potential for Alex Albon to take up one of their lead cars again in the future, or whether he'll just be cast aside as Pierre Gasly has been since being demoted back to the junior team last year. So it's a shame to see Alex Albon leaving the starting grid after just 2 years in the sport so far, particularly when you look at some of the other drivers on the grid for 2021. And it may feel as though Albon has just become another driver that's been chewed up and spat out by the ruthless Red Bull Driver Academy, but for me, it's perhaps slightly different this time. Throughout Albon's time at Red Bull, he's been supported in the media by Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. They definitely see the potential in Albon and seem as though they are keen to see him step up again in the future, so the narrative may have changed for the Red Bull Driver Academy. But at the same time, it'll be interesting to see how everything fits in the future as Pierre Gasly goes up against the rookie and Yuki Tsunoda next year in the AlphaTauri, an interesting lineup which seems to have a lot of potential. Meanwhile, Juri Vips and Jehan Daruvala line up in Formula 2 next year. If either of these drivers find a way to deliver a title challenge, will Red Bull's hand be forced as they look to potentially promote up into AlphaTauri again? Time will only tell on this one, but I predict that it will be Albon and Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri for 2022. So that's my opinion on what's next for Albon's career. It's a shame to see him leaving the grid, but I don't think this is the last we'll see of the Thai driver in Formula 1. Thanks for watching, and please leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content like this in the future.